The political configuration in Europe is facing major changes with the rise of populism and a quiet decline in the transatlantic relationship during the Trump administration. Today, I'm honored to interview Mr. Massimo D'Alema, former leader of the Italian Communist Party and former Prime Minister of this country between 1998 and the year 2000. There's no question about his left-leaning background. But how does he look at the rise of far-right movement in the election year of the European Union? Does he have any special feelings about the Chinese political institutions, and will he therefore easily build a bridge between China and the European Union through the Belt and Road Initiative? That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Ray.
Born in Rome on the 20th of April 1949, Massimo D'Alema was the 53rd Prime Minister of Italy from 1998 to the year 2000. Later, he was appointed as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs from 2006 to 2008. He is also a journalist and served for a time as National Secretary of the Democratic Party of the Left. Earlier in his career, he was a member of the Italian Communist Party, and he was the first former communist to become Prime Minister of a NATO country. From 2004 to 2006, Mr. D'Alema became a member of the European Parliament. And since 2010, he has been the president of the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, the political foundation of the Party of European Socialists.
Welcome to Dialogue, sir. Not only President Xi Jinping delivered an inspiring speech at Davos to safeguard globalization and freedom, but many observers pointed out this time around, with the opening and successful conclusion of the Belt and Road Summit in Beijing, it seems China stands ready to assume leadership for world economic recovery. But there is a strong voice saying, look, we need to be very careful. China is not ready yet. What do you think?
First of all, I was impressed listening to the President Xi Jinping in Davos, because nobody expected the leader of the Communist Party of China defending free market against the leaders of the most important capitalist countries, and which is a paradox, no? Because, in any case, I strongly believe that there is a great convergence of interests between Europe, European Union, and China in relaunching a new vision of globalization.
Excuse me, do you think European Union is ready to deliver a single voice following Brexit and the media fanfare about the populism, rise of ultra-right movement, refugee crisis, economic and debt crisis in some of the South European countries? Now, it seems it's difficult for the European Union to generate a single voice in dealing with China.
I believe that about Sino-European relations, there is a single voice. And the idea, the political will to improve these relations is spread in every European countries. And the fact that the Italian Prime Minister was present, he attended the Belt and Road Forum as a president of G7. We are going to host the G7 summit in Sicily. And it's very important because he wanted to underline that Italy wants to put on the table of the G7 the Belt and Road issue in order to achieve a support of the big Western power which are represented in the G7 summit. And well, you are right when you talk about the European crisis. While European economy is recovering, the crisis was very tough in Europe, but this year the Eurozone is growing 1.7, and the next year the growth will increase. I'm not so pessimistic about the future of Europe, and you have to consider that 1.7, 2 points for Europe is a lot, because the per capita GDP in Europe is very high, it's still very high.
No one questions the strength of the European Union economically. However, why do you think there is a strong voice calling for a deep reform of the European Union? Look at the outcome of the recent meeting between the newly elected French President Emmanuel Macron with Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, talking about how to build consensus in reforming the European Union so that no more populism will affect the healthy development of your economic integration.
Well, but populism is the outcome not only of the European crisis, but of the failure of globalization, of the neoliberal globalization, of globalization without rules, without social protection. And of course, there is a big difference between China, a country in which a Chinese young may believe that his life is going better, is getting better compared to the life of their parents, and Europe. Because in Europe, the dominant feeling is fear. Fear to lose the privilege and the social achievement that the European citizens were able to get during the last 50 years. And but I believe that the answer to the fear is to be more confident in ourselves, to relaunch also politically the European integration.
I'm afraid the increasing number of terrorist attacks in continental Europe have a lot to do with the issue of illegal immigration and the refugee crisis coming from Turkey. But the starting point, I'm afraid, is in North Africa due to the regional conflicts.
I don't think so. I don't think so because...
your borders won't be closed, and therefore there will be more immigrants. What about the free movement of labor resources?
Let me say, is a matter of fact that the terrorists are not refugees, a small minority, but they are European citizens. Because we have an Islamic immigration which is very old. We have 38 million of Muslims living inside the borders of European Union. In France, for instance, the people coming from Algeria or from Morocco, from Tunisia, are living in France.
But I'm afraid that these Muslims are the descendants of the immigrants, right?
Often the terrorists are European citizens of third generation, not the refugees or immigrants.
But perhaps we are talking about the
citizens of third generation. And the real problem is why the Islamic extremism and radicalism.
Don't you think this is an issue of ideology? Ideology leads to the fears.
Why yes, of course, the terrorism leads to the fear, I can understand. And we must protect the security of our fellow citizens. And we are trying to do that. The situation, in my opinion, is getting better because we are more prepared to face this new threat, which is totally new, because sometimes the radicalization goes through internet. There is not the refugees, but internet. People living in Paris, and people studying in Paris, but they feel to be marginalized. They are sometimes unemployed. They have no hope for their future, and it's relatively easy for the Islamic fundamentalism to expand its influence.
And therefore, do you think the relationship between the European Union and China will face new difficulties and challenges? For example, trade protectionism. In times of crisis, politicians who are elected into the office will have to represent concerns of the constituents. For example, their fear of losing jobs, and therefore they got to turn to protectionism. For example, China is not recognized as a full-fledged market economic status. Although we entered into the WTO back in the year 2001, the European Union still refuses to give us this status. Is that an approach of a protectionism?
I don't think protectionism is the solution. And I don't think that the majority of political forces, politicians, and representatives of European institutions are in favor of protectionism. It's not. In the United States, there is a strong push for protectionism, but it's a different situation. And of course,
but the impact of the far-right movement that does deliver the strong message that leaders, for example, Le Pen and her organization, her supporters, favor the idea of closing the borders, rejecting immigration, and turn to trade protectionism. And they represent dynamics in the new reconfiguration.
Yes, but let me say that Orban is not representing Europe. Hungary is a small country. Is not an influential country.
France is not a small country.
Hungary,
France is not a small country.
But in France,
Marine Le Pen.
But in France, the populism was defeated by the French citizens and Germany. And I believe that majority of the Europeans are not in favor of protectionism. They know that protectionism is not a solution, and we are confident enough in our competitiveness. Well, China is a great competitor, of course, but China is also a great market, an important market. You know, the country in which we sold a larger number of Ferrari in the last 3 years is not the United States, but China.
It's a shame, isn't it, that we are the biggest market of the luxury goods from European Union now.
No, not only
we
luxury
are
goods,
indeed
but
technologies,
high technology goods. I believe that it's possible to establish the trade between European Union and China is balanced, and we trade more than 1 billion a day of goods, and it's balanced. It is not unbalanced in favor of China. And
Your Excellency, you said 1 minute ago that China is a promising market, despite the fact that we are also a competitor, but we are not a market economy. From your perspective, will that be a major obstacle in the way?
I believe that I personally doesn't care, but my personal opinion that
it does care, because we'll face charges of, for example, anti-dumping, anti-subsidy investigations.
I believe that not recognizing to China the characteristic of market economy is a mistake. And we must find a solution. It depends also on China, because the problem is the protection of intellectual rights, of copyright. We want to have some guarantee for Chinese authority. That's normal, it's a negotiation. And, but I think we are going to solve this problem because
you failed to mention one major problem that China may be held accountable. For example, the export of steel overcapacity, and we are facing anti-dumping lawsuits from the European Union, right?
Yes, but it was this problem. It was more important in the past. Today, China is changing its model, its industrial model, and toward goods, high technology goods. And in China there are better salaries, which is good for Chinese and also for our competitiveness. And some people who invested in China for the low cost of the labor is now going toward Vietnam, Laos, other countries, and China is changing.
Other low-income economies, right? We are changing
China
our economic...
is changing, and
we are restructuring our economy with more emphasis on domestic consumption instead of relying on trade surplus. But you are watching Dialogue with Mr. D'Alema. Stay with us, we'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back, sir. Mr. Prime Minister, I did some homework about your background. You were the leader of the Italian Communist Party. With the end of the Cold War, the Communist International Movement started to lose its momentum. Your party changed the name, calling it Democratic Party of the Left, and you became Prime Minister as a result because of the majority momentum in the parliament. So looking back, China, against the expectations of most skeptical voices around the world, China became an economic miracle in less than 4 decades. What do you think of the Chinese communist leadership? Because we're going to soon have the 19th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. That's going to be a landmark event. While you marvel at the economic expansion of China over the past decades, what do you think of the issue of ideology? Do you still use the ideological lens to examine China, or do you think it's time to re-examine the Chinese way of development?
I'm an old friend of China. I know well China. I visited China many times. My first visit was in 1979. 1979. I was very young.
That's the year when Deng Xiaoping visited the United States.
I was the leader of the Communist Youth. And the Communist Party had broken their relation with the Communist Party of China because of our dissent about cultural revolution. And the relations was re-established after the victory of Deng Xiaoping and with the historic visit of Berlinguer. And I came before Berlinguer in order to prepare this visit, and it was impressive. And I visited China after this historical moment many times. Well, we changed our name. We became member of the socialist movement in Europe, which was, I believe, the natural development of our history, to become part of the democratic left, European democratic left. Is the same way that many communist parties, also in the east of Europe, have followed the same. I know very well the Socialist Party of Hungary, of Bulgaria. They were communist. They became socialist. And, well, the Communist Party of China didn't change its name, but changed a lot. Without changing name, the Chinese communists have changed their approach to the society, their ideology, their vision of market economy, and, well, it was done pragmatically, sometime with some ideological discussion. I remember a very interesting speech of Jiang Zemin in this sense, but in which he wrote that the Communist Party has to have within their its members also the capitalists.
This is what we call the three represent theory.
Yes, exactly. The three representative theory, which is very different from the communism orthodox of the past. And, well, I do appreciate that the Communist Party of China was able to modernize its vision, its culture, and to become a leader of a very strong economy and a leading economy in the world. Now, rightly, you are asking to be recognized as a market economy, which is for a communist a very new, very original position, very different from the former communism.
Other
Well,
than the market economic
everybody
status,
has changed in different ways.
times are changing, circumstances are changing.
Yes, yes, yes.
With the deepening of globalization, China has become one of the biggest beneficiaries of, to enjoy the dividends. Well, here is a contradiction. Overseas observers pointed out, on the one hand, China safeguards globalization and free trade. That's the legacy of neoliberalism for the world economy. Internally, there's still a heavy presence of SOE, state-run or state-owned enterprises. And it is for this reason, at least, the Europeans have been pretty reluctant to call China a full-fledged market economic status. My question is, what do you think of the dynamics of the non-public sector of our economy, the small and medium-sized enterprises? That, I believe, the SMEs in your country represent the pillar of your economy. So do you think in this area...
Backbone of our...
So do you think in this specific area, the two economies can strengthen their cooperation?
I believe that the private sector is growing in China, and of course the presence of the state is still very strong. But I have to say that also in the United States, the presence of the state is very important, because the state has a leading role in research, innovation, and military spending is often leading economy and pushing the economy of the United States. And well, I believe that also the Europeans, we talk about social market economy. Social market economy means market economy, but regulated but with some role that the state has to play, not as owner of big industry necessarily, while in strategic field sectors we have state industries in energy or in other strategic sector, in production of weapons, of military systems. But I think for many years, we assisted to a dominance of the neoliberal vision. The state is not needed, not anymore. And politics, the only mission that politics has is to do what economy wants. But this vision was the reason why we had the big financial and economic crisis in 2008, 2007, 2008. This vision. And we need a more balanced vision with, of course, a big role of private sector. Maybe in China this role has to grow, but at the same time we need rules at international level. We cannot accept the wild finance. We must fight against tax havens, because we cannot accept that rich people don't pay taxes, because it is unsustainable for our society. We have to stress that one of the consequences of wild globalization is the enormous increase of inequalities within our societies, and we must correct these inequalities. That's why I believe that we need a more balanced vision between the role of private sector and the role that state and politics have to play at national and international level.
Thank you so much for your political sophistication and the advice for running our economy. I do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.